Welcome, guys, to the qualification of Level 4 Certificate in Business Management. My name is Anissa, and I'll be taking over the Module 2 of Leadership and Organization with you. We're going to be discussing a little bit about the impacts of leadership qualities and skills of course, in organizations. So, the idea with this chapter is to be learning about leadership. What is leadership all about? How do companies use leadership when it comes to their management and their leading forward their staff members? You will learn a lot of skills and characteristics when it comes to what requires a successful leader and how can we identify the leaders that we've got in different organizations. Various skills needed by the learners will also be discussed in specific situations in companies because that way you can be able to learn the value of the leadership in the organizations and how they tend to move forward. There are three learning outcomes which we will be able to cover in this lesson. The first one is to evaluate the impact of leadership qualities and skills in organizations, which is going to be all related to the main skills required to make a leader become successful and how do we know that leader is successful. The second one is to identify the different skills and characteristics of successful leaders. So we can identify a couple of them. What makes a leader nowadays? Is a leader born or is a leader made? These are some of the things you can discuss in your companies when you're looking at examples and picking up some areas to identify how these organizations focuses on the leadership and what makes that leader become successful. Is it all the skills that they can be able to learn and become as a leader? Or do you think that leaders are actually born and they have those charisma and characteristics that makes them so unique and so different? Then the third one is to assess how different leadership styles can influence an organization. So here, therefore, we're going to be learning about the leadership styles, what are they, and how these can impact an organization, or how can they influence a company. Some of the leadership styles you may have perhaps thought about it or come across in your research previously is the main three types. They are very common used nowadays. One is autocratic, which is a very one-way system. And this one-way system is based on having one manager or one leader, and everyone has to follow what they say and what they would like to be doing in your company. The other one is a democratic leadership style, where here all the staff members have an input to the company's decisions and how the company is, of course, operating in their daily activities as well as weekly activities and so on. So, usually, with a democratic leadership style, every member of staff would have a say in that company and their voices are being heard and they all can participate, work together as a team rather than having just one way of a management or one way of a leadership. However, with the democratic, it's good that we have everyone to get involved and participate, but sometimes when it comes to decision making, companies may take a longer period of time here to kind of address everyone's ideas on the company before they can go ahead and make that decision. And sometimes this can lead a little bit of time consuming. The other leadership style is laissez-faire, which is a French word of let it be. And the laissez-faire is simply to just let all the staff members work towards their own roles and responsibilities that they have in the company. And this type of a leadership role, it's very individual orientated, so there isn't much management onwards to their staff. Staff members will just be freely working on their activities and working on achieving their particular roles and responsibilities that they have in the company. So these were the main three learning outcomes which we're going to be covering for this particular course. And each of them is quite an interesting subject because you get to look at what makes leaders be leaders, what are some of the qualities and skills required to have those leaders to be leaders, or those leaders which already exist nowadays in companies or throughout organizations, and some of the characteristics of making those leaders, rather if they are again someone who is born and have those unique characteristics, and if so, what are they? And that's part of the course. Or if it's something that they can learn through the process of experience and gaining the skills forward. And of course, the leadership styles is another idea to identify how companies can be influenced by these. So in this lesson, it's going to cover all of these areas of looking at leadership itself and to understand what we mean by leadership. There's a very good interesting definition by a couple of authors who have published quite a bit a long time ago of what are leadership as a definition. I'm just going to read them out to you. So this is the first one is by Northhouse, which was published in 2010. And they've said that leadership is a process whereby an individual influences a group of individuals to achieve a common goal. So this definition now is quite a straightforward one. It's very short and very simple. It's covering the main keywords to identify as individuals influencing a group of individuals to achieve a common goal. So no matter what the company is doing, whatever they are producing, whatever they actually providing to their customer, everyone who is a part of that organization, they all have the same goal. And that goal is what to accomplish within their job roles, job positions, and making everyone move forward. So it's kind of bringing the individuals with a group of people together, and they all are sharing that common goal and they need to be achieving that common goal. Looking at the second definition now, this is from Bowen, Tolson, and Panley, which they published this definition in 2002. It says, leadership is the interpersonal influence and exercised in a situation and directed through communication process towards attainment of specified goals. Now, you would say that this definition is also quite similar to the previous one because it still focuses on those specified goals. What are the company's goals that everyone has to come across in achieving those? And the idea with this definition, when it comes to the leadership, is saying that it needs to be influenced and exercised in a situation that can make that communication process as well as the interpersonal development to move on to achieving that common goal or achieving those specified goal. And that's the idea with leadership, is kind of taking everyone and driving them through as if you were in the car and you're just driving the car forward in getting to the destination that you'll need to be getting. So therefore, as leadership in organizations, they have to direct and they have to drive all their staff members forward in order to achieve those common goals that the company, of course, have to be achieving and have to be working towards it. We've got one more, the last one. This is the last definition. This is by Droth and Paulus in 1994. And they've said that leadership is the process of making sense of what people are doing together so that people will understand and be committed. Now, this definition is quite interesting comparing to the previous two because it focuses on what people are doing. So, what are people doing in the organization and what people understand in that organization and how committed they are in that organization. Of course, every company will probably need to have their staff members being committed. Imagine if there was no one committed, no level of motivation at all, then there will be no focus, no determination, no progression. So, therefore, it is very important that leadership brings that process forward to kind of look at what people are doing in those roles and in those positions. What do they actually understand, and how committed they are? And leadership is the best way to kind of identify these areas, focuses on people, look at the staff itself, look at their roles, look at their tasks, look at their activities, what have they been achieving so far, how much they've managed to do they need any support, do they need any help, do they need any particular areas that they perhaps need to develop on or they require some training. All of these features will be covering towards managing people. And how to manage people is, of course, leading them forward. And by leading them forward, they can be able to achieve the goals that they are determined to achieve. So that was quite a few interesting definitions there. Looking at some examples of what leaders do now, you may think that how can we identify a leader? How do we know who is a leader? Do we just look at maybe the experience they have? Do we look on how successful the company is? They've been leading this company forward. However, sometimes that leaders have also got entrepreneurial skills that may manage companies, but at the same time, they also look at other criteria to satisfy their own needs and other people's needs. So another way of looking at the followers and the how to direct that followers forward is a part of the leader's role in some extent. So what do actually leaders do? They create a vision. They have to have that direction towards those goals that they would like to be achieving. And those goals that are being set are the destination point that they need to be getting to. So to create that vision is what makes them a leader to look at what exactly they wanted to be achieving and how they're going to achieve that, what exactly they need to be doing in the process of making those goals up and running. So, creating a vision is a very important one when it comes to the characteristics of the leader. And in most cases, this part is all related to leaders itself looking at creating that long-term vision, whether if it's for a personal need or for the business need. And when it comes to sort of directing that forward or bringing that vision into life or into an existence is another capability or another skill, you may say, that is very important for leaders to have because many people may have a vision, it can be a 5 year vision for the company, but what do they do in taking that action forward in achieving that goal is the main capability of a leader to fulfill that role rather than just leaving it and then never making it into a reality. So we have to always think about the leaders as creating that vision and making that vision happen. Uh, the second the second sort of important tool here is communicating with the followers, which is another interesting point of what leaders actually have to do or what do they do. Because with communication with their followers, with their staff members, with their people that they actually lead in, it's very important to continuously communicate with them, rather if there is support needed, rather if there is any engagement, participation, maybe even to discuss about the main tasks or the main activities that they have to be looking after. So communication is very important and it has to be always up and running. Motivating and empowering followers, that comes also with their individuals that they are leading forward. Motivation is very important because if staff members or if followers are not motivated by their leaders, then they will lose interest, they'll become demotivated, and they will no longer have any interest in the leaders and they'll just maybe move elsewhere. Aligning people or looking at their values, creating a value that can be a type of a workforce that is a very friendly zone is also important for the leader. Making sure that everyone is getting along with each other, they have that social interaction, they kind of coming across and being happy to work together or having that leadership side to it that all the staff members are quite social with each other, and they get along with each other, so there isn't any conflicts or any issues that the leaders have to come in and do any problem solving there. They do serve as a symbol because staff members or their followers, they see the leaders as part of the main person that will lead them or direct them forward. And they create that trust, and that trust is very important for leaders. Leaders have to be able to give trust to others, and others have to trust them. And that's one of the main capability that the leader always needs to have. Because if there was no trust with them, then obviously the leaders will not be able to participate with their staff members or even with their followers. And again, they will end up losing interest there. And when it comes to managing themselves, it comes across to the skills and capabilities again that the characteristics of the leader is on how they manage their activities, whether if it's a daily activity or weekly activity or monthly activities in the organizations that they're owning, or maybe in their own entrepreneurial businesses. They have to look at the management side as well, especially when they have so many staff to look after and to direct forward. It does give them a principle to kind of focus and manage the self correctly. So these are some examples of what leaders do. When it comes to how leaders sort of can influence, when it comes to their influences to others, going back to the motivation and communication level, those two are very important to kind of influence others based on what the leader is trying to achieve. Rather, if there is their long-term sort of goal, or rather they wanted to create a vision, or they're bringing in something different, that they want all their followers or all of their particular staff members to kind of be brought together and pursue their goal or pursue that type of achievement. So these are some of the areas of how or what can leaders influence when it comes to the resources that they have, their activities, and the run through. Another important factor is that every leader needs to be very confident in their actions or in their activities. At the same time, they have to be very cooperative with everyone that they're dealing with. At the same time, they also need to allocate the resources wisely. So everyone somehow feels that they are part of the team, but at the same time they can trust the leaders, and the leader itself can be able to manage its own capabilities. And of course, they need to have a lot of knowledge in whatever field that they are leading forward. And that knowledge brings back on having a formal structure, having a system that everyone can be able to apply or organize in. Also building up the areas of the staff members or the members skills and development, so they can also participate and learn from others, which is of course a great experience to come across. How do leaders emerge? We have, according to Fernham here in 2012, they've come up with three type of approaches. The first approach is the bibliographical approach. The biographical approach is where the personalities and the characteristics contribute positively in creating the leaders. And this goes back to that question, are leaders born or are leaders self-made? Well, according to biographic approach, this approach says that those personalities and those characteristics are what makes the leader. So they've come across to as a young age, and they grow into those characteristics and into those skills, which is, they say that they are actually born to be that unique and that different to others, because not everyone can be leaders. However, in the second approach, which is the educational and development approach, this is where education qualifications comes in, the knowledge that can be learned through experience, the intelligence levels, as well as learning new skills, is what makes leaders become a leader. So there can be a self-made leader without having to be born or having to have those natural instincts to kind of lead people forward. So here in the second approach, it does say that leaders can be able to learn. So maybe they weren't a leader at first, and then they've picked up a lot of skills. They've got their qualifications. They've learned a lot of knowledge on the area. So therefore, they started to become a leader just by the experience and by the development and the educational side. And the last approach is the environmental approach. This is where the external environmental forces urge the evolution of leaders. So, in an environmental approach is kind of external, is what is happening in the market, how the market is evolving, how the environment is coming across and becoming maybe more and more um, demanding, more and more competitive, more and more focused on the consumer. So, whenever we have a lot of changes in the environment itself, this can also determine the evolution of leaders. So, if you look, for example, 100 years ago, if we had to think about who was a leader 100 years ago, who can we think of? And how they leaded back then? Then you can put up another example 50 years ago. Who was the leader back then? How do we pick up that leader and what made that leader be the leader? And then looking at the current stage, how can we identify who are the leaders now and what makes them be a leader? Is it because of their skills? Is it because of their experience? Or is it because of their successful organizations? So that evolution of leaders have kind of shifted quite a lot because from centuries to centuries you kind of evolve, the environment itself evolve, which is why that leaders itself have to adapt to the environmental situations in order to continue and become a leader. But even if you had to compare, if you're comparing a leader 100 years ago to a leader now, probably they will have many different characteristics because the situation and the environment that was back then is of course very different to how the environment and how the marketplace is right now. So the third approach is kind of giving a way on how leaders can emerge itself by looking at the evolution of the leaders within the environment and the marketplace that they are in. Also, if there are different leaders in different countries, that can also influence the leaders on the type of cultures, on the type on how they manage their staff, how do they focus on their activities or in their tasks, which again, if we had to compare them, it could be quite different because the countries itself are very different. So that gives an environmental approach to how we can sort of identify the leaders emerging to these approaches. So the first one, the biographical, is simply saying that the leaders are born because they have very unique characteristics that no one else will have. So it becomes as a natural scent or a natural instinct. So they are just naturally they're not just natural leaders. Then the second one, it says that this approach they can be educated and developed. So therefore, any leader can become a leader if they learn, if they are committed, and if they pick up the knowledge and experience. And then the last one is kind of looking at adapting to the environment and identifying the evolution of leaders in those environments as well. So these are some of the areas that we could look at when it comes to understanding the importance of the leadership in the organizations and to also cover the roles of these. There is another model that you guys can have a look as well when it comes to understanding the leadership of organizations. Again, every leader, the main responsibility is to inspire, and by inspiring their followers or inspiring their particular staff members is a way of achieving their goal. Also, they need to be very focused and very determined by creating that vision and by making that vision into a reality, as well as everyone has to focus on that reality when it becomes as a reality so they can determine the process. So that vision and that goal needs to be achieved there. And they have to enable all of their employees to kind of apply their resources that they require to maintain that and make it all happen. In some cases, in organizations, they can always reinforce the proper reward or recognition when it comes to their staff members achieving their goals or achieving those particular circumstances. And of course, the learning curve when it comes to the learning processes and continuing to learn throughout. There's another important example here, looking at the difference between a leader and a manager, because many people can sometimes get these two confused. They might think that a leader is the same as a manager or the manager is the same as a leader. However, it's not true. Managers are mostly orientated within the tasks in the department, so they will only focus on the planning, on the budgeting, on the controlling of the tasks, making sure that all their staff members are organized and they know what they are doing, they're achieving their particular activities, they implement those policies to them, making sure that again everyone in that department is following those policies, is following those particular areas of the activities and the tasks. Whereas a leader on the other side, they don't focus only on the department of that company or just to manage that department or manage those couple of people. They tend to lead the entire organization forward. So they become much more involved when it comes to making that decision making, building up their focus on the future of the organization, looking at motivating people, inspiring people as well, also using their focus on creating those goals and creating that vision and making that into reality. So they kind of have more of a broader picture of the organization rather than as managing one department or managing a couple of staff members in that department. Right, okay, so these were a couple of examples between what makes a leader, what makes a manager, and looking at some of these examples between the two. The first course that you're going to cover, it's very interesting because it covers those leadership styles, it covers the differences between management and leadership, as well as it's kind of picking up all the areas of the definitions and examples from them.